Hello, I'm your host Brian, and welcome to Apologetics 101. Today, we're going to be talking about a new paper that had been published this year, and on the genomic sequences of the ape genomes, and it has to do with the unalignable regions of the genome. And uh, this is incredible evidence. You couldn't buy evidence better than this. But you'll never guess. You never guess which side of this controversy concerning human and chimp similarity was this written on. More on that in a minute. All right. Today we're going to be talking about a paper that was published this year, 2025, on the completed ape genome sequences. Six different great apes was looked at. However, this time this study didn't look at the similarities. They looked at the differences that were not aligning. And so this was pretty cool. So I'm going to introduce this as an update to the Tomkins controversy because it's very interesting the fact that they're taking these completed genomes of the chimps or the great apes, including chimp, compare it to the fully sequenced T2T in terms of the regions of the genomes that were not aligning. They did not have agreement. The differences. And this is what they came up with, too. And we're going to get into that. But first, some little background information here. A while back, I was part of a movement. I should say, movement may not be a correct word. Um, I was part of a controversy, a massive controversy over human and chimp similarity. This centered around primarily the studies and work and conclusions done by Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins. I refer to it as the Tomkins Controversy because people got pretty wild in it, especially on the side of the evolutionists. They, name called and called Rob Carter all kinds of names because he posted a video just commenting on it. And so that forced Rob Carter to go and take a more deeper dive into this discussion matter, and that caused more people to write make videos on it. And of course, Erica had made a video some time back originally, posting her video on her response to Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins. And then, of course, I had my interview shortly thereafter with Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins, and Erica responded to that. And then I also did a 14 episode series called The Tomkins Controversy, in which I discussed a lot of things. Erica had made some major mistakes in her initial experiments. Her second batch of experiments were also bad because they assumed Glenn Williamson's misrepresentation of Tompkins's study, and so and recently Erica had a debate with Dr. Jerry Bergman. I'm going to be having Dr. Jerry Bergman and Dr. Peter Line on my channel to review that debate. But in that debate, she talked about her videos on Tompkins. She said, "Oh, I refuted Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins." Like, no, she didn't. She said, "Oh, I replicated Tompkins's method." No, she didn't. The first one, she didn't use a parameter called max HSP S1, where you set the best alignment, and she had a program in there to average them all up. She admitted to all of this in her video response to Carter. She admitted the whole thing, and she admitted to not replicating Tompkins' method either. And then on the second video where she redid the experiments, she redid them, but she redid them assuming that Glenn Williamson was right about what Tompkins allegedly did, and so she applied that faulty calculation method, which Tompkins never even did in his study, and to the work and that sort of thing. And so that botched up the experiments, and it means that she did not replicate Tompkins' method for the second time. So she never replicated Tompkins' method. But I did post a video recently on that as well on Are We or on the Are We Apes series, where I talked about the percent similarities between human and chimps. I talked about the fact that this is based on the alignable regions of the genome, what can actually be aligned, one-to-one agreement. You can have some differences in alignment, but you can't have much. You can have like small differences. You can't have large differences. You can't have large indels. You can have small indels, but you can't have really large indels. You can't have a consistent amount of differences in the alignment. If you did, it wouldn't align. I mean, that's just simple fact, simple logic. That's because these algorithms are designed to look for similarities, not differences. And so, tremendous amount of differences could be ignored, and therefore, this would affect your overall results. So, although it is true that the alignable regions of similarity would be 96%, that number is really an artificial number. The real number is much lower than that. And it would be based on the differences. In the Tomkins Controversy, I even mentioned that the similarities and differences, there's a ratio between them. It's not that one would affect the other. Similarities will affect the differences, differences will affect the similarity, and the overall percent similarity will be judged based upon the total amount of the genetic information that's there. And so you can't just simply say that that well 96% aligned. Yes, 96% aligned, but that's not the actual overall percent similarity. Once you factor into the differences, and this is a thesis I had at the very beginning, or even before I even started the Tomkins Controversy series, where I responded to Erica, where I responded to Glenn Williamson and others involved in the controversy. When you have when you have if you take the differences and you plug them back in to the overall percent similarity, your percent similarity drops, and the total actually it actually affects it because your pool of data increases, and this increase is coming from differences. So guess what happens to your percent similarity? It goes down. And that got proven later in another video that I did. It showed the effects. It's called Unmatched. It showed the effects of when you factor in these differences, it does drop the percent similarity. Well, this is something that Dr. Richard Buggs also talked about. We're going to talk about that in a second. Which I also talked about Dr. Richard Buggs at the very beginning of my series, as well as, I've talked about it before. And I had reached out to Dr. Buggs because some people thought that Dr. Buggs had changed his mind. He hadn't changed his mind. He still held to the 85% number. But some people misunderstood a paper that him and Dr. Seaman had written together, and didn't realize that Dr. Buggs wasn't trying to explore human and chimp similarity there. He was just trying to test out a particular software. So they had misunderstood and misrepresented the paper, and assumed that Dr. Buggs had changed his mind when he hadn't. He still held to the 85% number. Good thing, too, because a new paper has been published this year. A new paper on the completed genomes of the ape genomes, exploring the differences, not similarities, the differences in the genome with 6 different apes, 6 different great apes, compared to the human T2T. The human fully sequenced genome, the T2T, and compares it to that, including chimp, by the way. Chimp, bonobo, orangutan. I think there were 2 different species of orangutan in there, and that sort of thing. So there are like 6 different apes, including chimps. And they looked at the differences that were not aligning. So we're going to get more on that in a minute. But first, let's go to Richard Buggs. Let's see what. Let's talk about that. Just kind of rehash that. I know that I talked about it in the first episode of the Tomkins Controversy, but I want to go over and talk about it now because he does say some stuff in that blog that is very relevant to what we're going to be discussing here. All right, we're in Dr. Richard Bugg's blog, How Similar Are Humans and Chimpanzee Genomes. I will be linking this in the description box below. Okay, he goes over a previous conversation he had on biologos. Dr. Richard Bugs, by the way, is a theistic evolutionist, and so he is a type of creationist, but he's not a young Earth creationist. So he doesn't favor young Earth positions and things like that. He is an evolutionist. Um, and he talks about a conversation he has on biologos. The best way to assess the similarity of two genomes is to take a complete genome assembly of both species that has been assembled independently and align them together. The alignment process involves searching the contents of the two genomes against each other. Parts of both genomes that are too different to match up. This is important. Parts of the genome that are too different to match up one another will be absent from the alignment, unless they are very short, in which case they will be included as indels. Longer indels, even if they were well characterized, flanking sequences will be absent from the alignment. Within parts that do align, there will be some mismatches between the two genomes where one or a few nucleotides differs, which in this discussion we have been calling SNPs. SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphisms. So that's what SNPs stand for. In addition, there will be some parts of each genome that are present twice or multiple times in one genome and are present fewer times in other genome. We have referred to them as paralogs or copy number variants, CNVs, to come up with an accurate figure of the similarity of the entirety of the two genomes. We need to take into account these types of differences. In other words, you got to also take in those differences in order to have a more accurate determination of what the overall percent similarity is determined. For some purposes, when we talk about the similarity between two genomes, we want to just focus on one type of difference, such as SNPs. If we do this, we should always specify what types of differences we have and have not taken into account. The most well-known estimates for the similarity of the human and chimpanzee genomes only take into account SNPs and small indels. Copy number variants are less included, and regions of the two genomes that do not align are commonly ignored. Everything Richard Bugg's saying here is correct. When assessing the total similarity of the human genome to the chimp genome, we also need to bear in mind that this is going to go into the amount that had not yet been sequenced at the time of 2018, which is when Richard Bugs had made this blog. Yep, right here. Had made this blog in 2018. All right, so we're going to go move past that. Okay, he goes further how he came up with it. Then he goes into this. He starts talking about the specific percent that had no agreement in the genome, and what he ultimately came up with. He came up with 84.38%. He goes through these figures again and says that's like 82.34%. So this was an older one. Thus, the large improvement of the chimpanzee genome assembly between Pancho 4 and 6 has led to an increase in CNVs detected. So in other words, the differences actually increased over time, and a decrease in the non-aligning regions. Okay. It has only increased the one-to-one exact matches from 82 to 84.38%, even though the chimpanzee genome assembly is at least 8% more complete, I think, than Pancho 6. Okay, and he goes further. He talks about the process he goes through on this. What's not been assembled yet at the time of 2018. And he makes a prediction about the 95% figure will prove to be wrong. 95% figure will prove to be wrong because on the basis of my comparison to Pancho 4 and Pancho 6 alignments to HG38 was the the sequence of the human genome at the time. This is before, well before we did the T2T. The T2T got sequenced like I think it was either last year or year before, but it hasn't been sequenced long. And HD38 was the most current sequence at the time of the 2000. He wrote this blog. I think that the CNV difference are here to stay, and I doubt that all of the current unaligned or unsequenced regions of the human genome will prove to all be 95% the same as the chimpanzee genome. Some of the unaligned human sequences are medium-sized indels, and it is hard to see why they would not have been assembled in the chimp if they were present. I also expect at least some of these unaligned sequences or unsequenced sequences to be rapidly evolving. Now that's something that evolutionists sometimes throw up a rescue device called where they just think it's rapid evolution to explain these differences. We're going to go into the paper, and they're going to present that same rescue device. It's going to be in the paper. So, but that's just their presupposition, because they do assume that evolution will take place. And Richard Buggs is an evolutionist, like I said, so he assumes the same thing. He talks about a mistake that he made. We're not going to go the rest of that, because it's just involving the 70% number. He thinks that might have been underestimated. Okay, let's go over to the paper now. This paper was published this year in 2025, as you can see here, February 2025, so early this year. And it's published by like a lot of peer-reviewed papers. Sometimes in secular literature, you get a lot of names on this paper. So there's a lot of names. U is first, YOO, U. So the way I've been presenting it, whenever I author it or I reference the author, I always say U et al. But that's a lot of names. I don't want to go through every name on there. But at any rate, he wrote this paper, and he goes into the differences. It gets really technical. And the part that I want to show, though, is right here. All right, this right here. Says, indeed, 12.5 to 27.3% of an ape genome failed to align or was inconsistent with a simple one-to-one alignment, thereby introducing gaps. 12.5 to 27.3% is what he says. All right. I ran this through ChatGPT. Show you this, and this is what he came up with. ChatGPT says according to U et al. 2025, between 12.5% and 27.3% of the chimpanzee genome fails to align or is inconsistent with simple one-to-one alignment to the human genome. This means only 72.7% to 87.5% of the genome can be confidently aligned between the species. Adjust total genomic similarities. Let's assume 96% identity in the aligned portions. That's what the 96% that often gets commonly cited there is 96% in the alignment. And in other words, what can be aligned? Only 72.7% to 87.5% of the genome is alignable. Okay. Then the realistic overall similarities become, okay, in case 1, 87.5% alignable, 87.5% times 96% equals 84% overall genomic similarity. And in case 2, 72.7% alignable, 72.7% times 96% equals 69.8%. Now, of course, when you actually do the math, the decimals will be like over here, and you just simply move them to the right by 2 places. And so that's how you get the 84% and the 69.8%. So basically, this would mean that the great apes that have these differences are would be 69.8% to 84%. Now, the thing that I'm interested in is the chimp, which is among them. Now, of course, this right here is a range because we're dealing with 6 different apes, right? And so this is a range that it is. So the chimp would fall in this range, but it would not necessarily have to be like let's say 69%. You know what I'm saying? One of them probably is 69%, but the chip doesn't have to be 69%. So it's more than likely going to be closer to probably 84%. There's no way to know for sure unless they individually examine chimps, but this right here is for all apes involved, and so more than likely the chip's going to fall somewhere in that range, probably closer to the 84%, but don't know for sure. But anyway, I thought that was very interesting because that would mean that according to this calculations, based on the differences that are there, and by the way, the writers of the paper seem to see these differences as being very significant. Actually, if you go through the paper, the writer is constantly referring to rapid evolution like they think it rapidly evolved. They don't try to prove that. They just kind of assume that because of how many differences are involved and things that they think are related. So it's kind of circular and it's a rescue device. But the interesting thing is that the writers of the paper are acknowledging that these differences significantly affect the overall result and that these differences cannot be aligned with the algorithms that we use to test these similarities. So I find this very interesting. This paper, peer-reviewed paper, published this year in 2025 by evolutionists, actually look into the differences they're not aligning. In these complete sequences of 6 different great apes, including chimps, in which case they compared them to the T2T, but they were looking at the differences. They were trying to investigate how much differences are between them in comparison to the T2T. And there's a quite significant amount of differences. The paper takes size into consideration. It takes the amount of differences into consideration between them and that sort of thing, and it actually demonstrates that the differences do affect the overall results, and apparently this also vindicates both Tomkins and Richard Buggs because both of them argued for a number as low as 84%, between 70 to 84, or around 70 to 85, usually where Tompkins and Buggs usually gravitate to. Buggs didn't think it would be no higher than 88% or 89%. I didn't think it would be any higher than 87%, but again, I was assuming a worst case scenario, and Buggs probably was too. Obviously, it would have to depend on how many similarities were in the leftover amount that was being sequenced that hadn't been sequenced yet. Was there more similarities there? Was there more differences? And depending on whether there's more similarities or more differences, depending on whether that number was going to drop or rise up, it dropped by a little bit. Well, not since Buggs did his, but it did drop since Tompkins did his, it dropped a little bit. But it didn't drop that much by when Buggs did his study. But I think that's kind of really interesting. But the 96% similarity is indeed an artificial number. And this video was never intended to be long. It was just kind of adding that to it because I find this very, very interesting that that this study was being made by evolutionists, strongly committed evolutionists, wrote a peer-reviewed paper in Nature. I'm going to be linking this in the description box below, and they published it in Nature, and they looked in the differences and they say, wow, there's quite a bit of differences between the great apes and humans. And they looked at the differences that were not aligning. And so I think that's very interesting. Post your comments below. Let me know what you think. And God bless. I'll see you on the next one.